the preeminent legal minds in one of the greatest athletic facilities across the country. This is Courtside. I'm your host, Matthew Holmes, and today I'm joined by the Honorable Chad Readler of the United States Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. Judge Readler, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
First, we're going to ask an easy question, a layup. Judge Readler, between the SEC and the Big Ten, who produces better athletes and who produces better clerks?
Great question. So welcome to Chrysler. Michigan basketball was very influential in my life, especially around the time of going to college. My junior year, the Michigan basketball team won the national championship, which probably helped influence my decision to come here for school. And my sophomore year, the Fab Five came to school as freshmen, so I was able to follow their career over the next 3 years. And I'm a huge Michigan basketball fan, so it's awesome to be here. I think given the venue, the answer to your question is quite obvious. This is a layup. Obviously, the Big Ten. I'll give you one statistic. Who has won the last 2 national championships in football? The Big Ten. With respect to law clerks, that's a tougher choice, but I'll just say I've had 2 terrific law clerks from Vanderbilt. But otherwise, I've had many more from the Big Ten. And at this point, I'm going to say it's a push.
And that brings up the mid-range floater. The question we have is, what was the biggest challenge you faced transitioning from being a practicing lawyer to being a judge?
So the great thing about being a litigator is the simplicity in that you have a position you're advocating for, and there's lots of ways you can sort of posture your case to get to the result you want to get to. But as a judge, you actually at the end of the day have to make a decision, and that can be very hard. So for the litigator, you sort of know, here's the result I want. I'm going to make the arguments that I hope will get me there, and I don't care necessarily so much about the next case. I only care about mine. But as a judge, you want to get that case right, and you want to write a decision that's going to make sense not only in the case before the court then, but also in a future case. So I have found the hard part of the job is thinking through what's the right result in this case, and how will this rule hold up for future cases when a future panel in my court has my decision, they're trying to apply it to a future case, hopefully will hold up well.
And from the corner, it's time for the three-pointer. What do you think is the most misunderstood aspect of the judicial system?
Yeah, three-pointers are tough for me. I was more of a post player during my day, so I didn't venture out to the three-point line all that often. But I'll probably go back to maybe the last answer I gave. I think maybe the viewing public thinks that judges sort of always have their minds made up about an outcome, and they have some personal view that's influencing the way they're going to decide a case. And I just have to say, from my experience, that is not true. Certainly every judge comes to the bench with their own life experiences and their professional experiences, and that might shape how they think about issues. But we really don't have preconceived notions. We're taking every case as it comes and just trying to get the right answer. So the idea that, if you have a certain judge, the case is absolutely going to come out a certain way because you think one thing or another about a judge, I just think is not true. And I can give you many, many examples from my career where I've been maybe surprised at the way I came out at the end, or have been surprised about how some of my colleagues have come out at the end of a case.
And now it's time for the half-court shot, where we ask a more challenging question. Have you ever had a case, maybe as a litigator, that kept you up at night? If so, why?
I literally had one. I argued one case in the United States Supreme Court, and if I slept an hour the night before that argument, that's probably being generous. I tried. I could not sleep. I think if I'd done it again, I maybe would have been able to sleep a little more. But for that one time, at most, I slept an hour. But I will say that was a case, that was a pro bono case that involved a defendant who was in prison for life. I also did some pro bono cases for clients who were serving death sentences. And just more generally, those were the kinds of cases that I really thought about a lot and just really appreciate the consequences of, the judicial outcome. In one case, I was successful, and my client avoided the death penalty. In the other case, I wasn't. And that case in particular is one I'll never forget.
That brings up the buzzer beater segment of the show, where we ask rapid fire questions with shorter answers. To dive on in, question number 1. If you could have dinner with anyone alive or dead, who would it be? Why?
Well, given the setting, there's a lot of people obviously to choose from. I'm going to say Gerald Ford. Okay. So Gerald Ford is the only Michigan alum that went on to be president. But there's a lot of reasons I'd like to talk to him because we shared a lot of interests. One, he played football at Michigan and was a terrific player. Actually, was on a part of 2 national championship teams. He then went on to law school, had both a legal and political career, and of course became president during a difficult time in our country's history. Pardoned Richard Nixon, which is a very controversial decision. Ran against Ronald Reagan, who's one of my personal heroes in a primary. So I'd love to talk to President Ford, and he is a real Michigan man.
Question 2. Who's your judicial inspiration?
So for lawyers of my vintage, if you think of yourself as an originalist and textualist, I think it's really hard not to say Justice Scalia. I mean, you just can't understate the influence that he had on a whole generation of lawyers. I remember picking up Supreme Court opinions, and if Justice Scalia wrote, you read that opinion first, whether it was majority, concurring, or dissent. But I'll add to that at a more personal level, and this one chagrins me to say a little bit because he's an Ohio State alum, but Jeffrey Sutton, Chief Judge Sutton is my colleague on the Sixth Circuit. He's been influential during my time on the bench, but as a very young lawyer, I had the privilege of working with him at the Jones Day Law Firm, and he's just probably the best lawyer I've ever worked with in my career, and taught me so much about what it was like to be an advocate, to write a good brief, to be a great lawyer. That was so helpful to me early in my career that I'd be remiss not to mention Judge Sutton as well.
Excellent. Question 3. What's the best piece of advice you received as a young attorney?
I don't know if I received the advice, but I will just say, looking back over my career, finding mentors who can help you sort of navigate your career. Judge Sutton would be one I just mentioned. Don McGann is someone who came into my professional career later on in my life and was very influential in a couple of ways. But for young lawyers, finding mentors, it can be professors, it can be lawyers you're working with, people in your community who can help give you advice, kind of look down the road and spot some good opportunities, maybe recommend some things to do, some things not to do. That's invaluable, and I just strongly recommend that for anyone new in their career, and even as you evolve along in your career.
Question number 4. What's a law school memory that stands out to you?
So it's been almost 3 decades since I was in law school. I probably suppressed a few of the memories, but let me just say I remember probably my favorite professor, Doug Kahn. He was a tax professor here at Michigan. And I'll say I signed up for tax class, but it wasn't one that I was, thinking I'd be riveted by. And it just showed to me the impact that a great teacher can make. I loved my tax class. I'm not sure I've ever practiced tax law since then. I've not had very many tax cases on the bench, but Doug Kahn was a wonderful professor. And one thing that I remember he did is before many class, he was a season ticket holder to basically every Michigan sport. And at the beginning of class, he would always come out and put tickets on the front of the desk and say, if anyone wants to go to the hockey game tonight or the basketball game, there's tickets up here. It turns out you would sit next to him. So they were his season tickets, and I did that once. That was a privilege too. So there's so many great faculty who've worked at the law school over the years, but Professor Kahn was one of my favorites.
That's great. And that's a wrap for questions. Judge Readler, thank you so much for joining us. Let's go shoot some hoops.
Go Blue.
Go Blue.